This is day 4 of the February 90 7-day retreat at Springwater. Referring to what was said yesterday in the beginning of the talk, why make something special out of a person, in this case here, out of Toni, just because when meeting together or working together in a talk, something may clarify. In connection with that, someone asked, why do we listen to Toni and not to each other? Or is it that we give more worth to listening to her and less or none in listening to each other? It all comes back to the listening, doesn't it? How does one listen? And is one assuming that just because people are sitting in a room quietly while someone else is talking, looking like a captive audience, does one assume that therefore listening is taking place, a listening which is a working together, not just listening to the words, but going it together? And if that is taking place, it doesn't depend on the person. Or does it? If two people, whoever they are, can do that, what difference does it make what their names are, or their backgrounds, their history? Their jobs? So in listening, are we already thinking this person has something and the other person may just be parroting? It comes up a lot. It's a real difficult thing. The interpretation of the words that are being used. If we talk here, a certain language evolves. And it is so easy to assume that somebody who uses this language is just parroting Toni. So, how can we find out? How can we tell for ourselves whether what is said or where something that is said comes from? And for that we have to dialogue with each other. And yet someone may insist that the other is echoing something. And no amount of dialogue can convince one otherwise if one holds to a conviction and listens out of conviction or interpretation. likewise, someone using different words may still come from idea, conviction, memory. How can we tell? How can we meet each other directly? If there's clarity and words come out of looking, does this mean that this clarity or direct looking is transmitted to the other person? Not necessarily. Maybe not at all. I don't know whether it's transmittable. Those things are not known how they operate. Suddenly two people see the same thing simultaneously. Same kind of energy. How did it happen? What was the cause of it? One is at a loss to say. And yet in this kind of communication or communion it has been called, there is no you and me. And the words that are being used are not the essential part. So, in listening, is the mind just there openly, unattached, we could say, to previous opinion, not comparing? Is what this person is saying the same, similar, or different from what another person is saying? These things happen. The brain does that. It's trained and conditioned to compare, to catch that, and to find out firsthand that in comparison, listening is jammed. At that moment, something was lost in the listening, in the moving with what is being said. And through the comparison, the listening may be affected. One hears through a screen. How can there be freedom from that screen instantly as it is noticed? Can there be? If one sees that it's screen and that comparison is irrelevant at this moment, can there just be the simplicity of being there and looking? Openly, without prejudice. Or cherished assumptions, attachments. This goes for both the one who's talking and the one who's listening. The process is not so different. The whole problem that we have dealt with, I think, already in two talks, maybe in all three of them, problem of hurt keeps coming up in meetings, taking that under the magnifying glass, as it were, which is so important for our daily living together, to understand something profoundly about hurt, how it comes into being, its consequences. Someone asked, let's take the example of having been slighted by someone in the past. And the resentment that comes up internally, the emotions. Is seeing that and putting an end to it, is that a neutralization of emotions, meaning a distancing oneself from all of what happened? It was something like this, that the question was put in some way like this. Isn't it, looking at it, the ending of it, a neutralization of emotions, a distancing oneself from these emotions? And to really find out what goes on, we were just looking very precisely as there is capability in us. What happens when a memory comes up of having been slighted by someone? Already to be aware that a memory is arising. The real thing is gone. The memory is deposited wherever. And here is the capacity to look at it, the memory of this incident. The person saying something and the immediacy of feelings, hurt, feeling devalued. Feeling devalued is already interpretation of the feeling of hurt. Even the word hurt is not what is exactly happening as somebody says something. It's already interpreted what this person says. He or she doesn't value me because of the way she talks to me or he talks to me. The brain is at work interpreting. And from that, the hurt. Is that true? Maybe there are other cues, the sound of the voice. But if one had never heard a disparaging voice before, would one feel devalued by it? Or is that already all the past knowledge of having been disparaged or humiliated, ridiculed, operates to interpret this present incident? And it all reverberates with the present stimulation, with the words of this person. Is one looking? How do we say that we are hurt? What is going on? Can one wonder about this and try to really get a hold of it? We've mentioned it yesterday and the day before. We talk to ourselves. In addition to the instantaneous memory reactions, we also talk to ourselves about what is happening. There is a running commentary about what is going on, what this person is doing to me, and the nerve of him or her. Or why is this always done to me? I don't deserve it. Or one can listen to it as it happens, and all of this aggravates the hurt, doesn't it? Because the organism responds very sensitively and very immediately and complexly to the words we say to ourselves about the scenario that is going on. And amazingly enough, can all be happening again by just remembering the incident. The whole thing repeats itself, and by repeating itself, assures a greater likelihood of this coming up again and happening again with the same emotions when we think about it again. One may, in imagination and fantasy, tell a person things that one didn't at the time. One was too shocked or intimidated, or one said something one feels, I should have really said that. And in saying that, the body responds again, in saying that in fantasy. And that can go on for a long time, depending how deeply one felt the hurt. The hurt to what? What was hurt? One wants to be regarded and respected and treated in certain ways. And if it doesn't happen, what gets hurt? The idea I have of myself, the image. Somebody talks to me respectfully, and I feel worth something. Valued and attached to that, and attached to the person who says that. Does that go on? It does go on, doesn't it? I expect that again from this person, because the feeling of worth, being valued, appreciated, it feels good. Whatever all the physiological processes are that contribute to this feeling good, energy may be aroused. And when this expectation is foiled by someone not respecting me today, I trusted him or her. I trusted his or her respect. Trusting means expecting something that was to continue in time. And the shock when what was expected, based on past experience and past good feelings, doesn't happen. Not only doesn't happen, but turns into something painful, hurtful, a slighting remark. Then, because of what this person said to me, do I feel worthless? And because somebody says something respectful, I feel of worth? Is that what determines how I feel about myself? How this image shapes up about myself? It's a good part of it, isn't it? And with that shaping up of the image comes the dependency on what keeps the image feeling valuable, worth, and the fear of what will devalue it. It may be just this person, or it may generalize into people, fear of people. Because what may come at me from people is devaluing, make me feel of no worth. Can one see how all of this is open to continued observation as it happens? Learning about all of this in oneself and each other, shedding light on what otherwise goes as a dimly, darkly process within ourselves and between each other. Now the question was, what happens when this is seen? And in this particular case, the person said, if it's seen, there can be a cutting off of this dialogue, which brings about all of the feelings in the memory, in the body. The remembered scenario is in the mind, the bodily feelings are throughout the body. It's an inseparable system, so it seems. So what happens when there's awareness of this, some waking up to what is going on? And there's a very crucial moment. All kind of things can happen. The feelings may be so strong to want to go on with the dialogue and giving the person a piece of one's mind, which one wasn't able to do a few days ago or weeks ago, that the moment of coming to is landslided over by more words, more emotions. One doesn't want to stop. All systems are go to relieve themselves of pressure, or so it seems. New pressure builds up in the process. And as we said before, the more we go over something, the more likelihood of its coming up again with greater reliability or strength, because something physiologically seems to get strengthened every time we go over something. Or at a moment of waking up to the scenario that it is taking place, a new train of thought can emerge. You should know better than this. Don't get involved in all of this stuff. It's nonsense. Keep to your practice. Listen to the birds. Don't get into all of this emotional stuff. And thought has power, particularly if we have thought like this a lot of times. Controlling ourselves through principles, ideas, which are often introjected from how we were brought up. Stop this nonsense. Don't you know any better? Sit still, sit quiet. Shut up. this is no good, this is not getting me anywhere. These may all be the thoughts that have a controlling influence on what went on before. And with this, I'm asking, is with this coming this feeling that one is sort of distancing oneself from the emotions? In these admonishments that come out of our past, that have been learned and are operating now to interrupt this scenario, is also the sense of me knowing better and needing to control undesirable parts of the me or processes of the me against the me, thought against thought, thought controlling thought. And with controlling thought, controlling emotion. The resentment may abate the anger because the thought of what she or he said to me doesn't run anymore. So the emotions may have a chance to abate. And this person was wondering about this. Is this what you're talking about? Seeing something and the ending of something, this emotional distancing. We so easily want to ask, is this what I'm supposed to do? This person didn't ask that, but this is sort of the frame in which we work most of the time due to our conditioning. What I should do, really, in a case like this. And what is said here is often picked up as new shoulds. How we should respond, how we should do in sitting, what we should and what we shouldn't do. It's so radical to see that this is not what we're saying. What we're trying to get at is what is taking place. Not what should take place, but what is actually happening, and the energy gathering in the interested inquiry and looking, attending, and learning as one is attending or as there is attention. Shedding light on the whole process. So can it be seen that a new thought process may have taken over? And the thought of me in control remains intact. And the duality that is experienced, a distancing from my emotions, remains intact. Because thought has created another aspect of me, the controller, versus the emotional responder, responding with hurt or resentment. Thought can continuously create new parts of the me, not just two. Can one watch that, see it for oneself, when this happens? It's not easy because we get so involved in all of this. And yet, amazingly enough, every once in a while there's a coming to and a wondering what's going on. A brief opening up. That's why we said earlier, such a crucial moment. This moment of coming to, realizing what's going on. And at that moment, will there be another conditioned response? Woe me, I should know better. Or just not knowing what to do with all of this, just looking at it, seeing it as it is. The dialogue, the emotions, the remembrance, the inner pressures to go on with it. wanting relief and so forth. And the coming up of admonishing oneself to see this whole thing. Without doing. No doer in that. Direct seeing has no doer. It has no thought in it. It sheds light on thought that was an instant ago. And in the seeing, when no thought takes over immediately, when thought does not take over immediately, when there's just the seeing, there is an intelligence in that understands what is going on. And in that intelligent seeing, the whole thing may abate. Whatever its time of rhythm may be for the emotions to come to quiet, a pounding heart, or adrenaline distributed, or muscles tense. Some tension may be so habitual it may not relax, but the instigator, the remembrance and the holding on to one's identity as being valuable or not valuable, and the feeding of it through others, all of that may abate at that moment, if it's seen intelligently, out of nowhere. No vantage point and no action taken to do something about it. The vulnerable openness of seeing, that's all. With the intelligence that's there on its own. In that case, there's no distancing, because there's no one created to be distancing herself or himself from this incident. That is seen as thought. And the emotions that have arisen, why distancing? Why distance oneself from what the body is up to or involved in, is felt? We talked yesterday at great length and depth into touching pain, sorrow, sadness, anger, resentment. It doesn't matter what it is that's touched. Without separation. Without a doer who knows better. It all takes place in not knowing better, not knowing what to do. And therefore, the unfolding of what's happening in a quiet awareness. Quiet not necessarily meaning that all thought is quiet, but when thought arises, can it be captured, seen? Its content, its effect, its momentum, its power. It was not just one person, there were several people who brought up something very similar, and in several cases the question was asked, what if there is an urge to pursue this thing, this injustice that was done to one, or the misunderstanding, or whatever? And there is such a thing in the brain where it seems as though unfinished business was stored for further action. Something has not been finished, not been settled in one's feelings, and therefore it keeps coming up. Well, one can look at it here. What the quality of this unfinishedness is. One person asked, doesn't it behoove me to make the other person understand what he did to me? Isn't that what this work is all about? I would right now drop all assumptions what this is all about and just look at it. Can one make anybody understand something? And how are we going about it? How do we come on? How do we sound? This is already the beginning of a new controversy or conflict. Do we know how the other person is perceiving us? Or has perceived us at the moment of the conflict, whatever he or she said? How did she or he see me? How did I sound? That's a different approach, isn't it? And it's not easy to ask that. How will we ask it? Will we ask it already with a chip on our shoulder? I'm just waiting until you finish, and then I tell you what I really meant. Again, is there the openness of trying to find out? And if there's the pressure of unfinished business behind it, I don't know how open we can be to find out what was really in somebody else's mind as he or she made this devaluing remark or gesture or whatever. And we can't assume that the person will remember that or remember it accurately. We don't know ourselves all that goes on in our mind, all the layers and layers of motives. How can we expect someone else to understand all of that? How can business be finished so that the brain that tries to think over it, think differently about it, belabor it over and over, quiets down? It doesn't tackle that anymore. It's done with it. Is that possible? That something so hurtful, so crying for a pursuit, demanding a pursuit of it, can end? So that when we meet this person next time, it may be or may not be brought up again, but not out of any reaction to what happened before, but freshly. Out of caring about each other and our mutual deep layers of past hurts, past motives, past shut-offs, which at times explode into the most unkindly of remarks. Which means, doesn't it, the clearing up needs to happen in oneself. If it's not clear in oneself, the unclarity will be taken into the pursuit of it. And one cannot hope or expect that confronting each other again or talking to each other again will bring clarity if one doesn't enter it clearly, oneself. The other person may or may not see, and one understands how that is. Often we don't see. Most of the time we don't see. We insist on something. We insist on our hurts and on our rights. On our image, on the need of it. And defense of it, protection of it, that is indispensable for living. Somebody just asked this morning, do you think that the me is necessary for living? Something like that. One has to be clear what one means by the me. Certainly necessary for living is to breathe and eat and stay warm or cool. Putting clothes on, putting nice clothes on. Is that necessary for living? Not necessary for living to have nice clothes on. But is it something divisive? One can question it. But the holding on to the idea of me as someone separate, special, worthy, unworthy, sufficient or insufficient, with all of its needs to have that constantly confirmed and its fears to have it constantly denied. Is that necessary for living? I don't think so. Is that a hypothetical question, a theoretical question? Not necessarily, because we justify the me, the self, often before we even question it. Question it completely, not knowing what the answer will be. But because we're questioning it, we may see it more clearly as it operates in pain and pleasure, agony and reveling in it. And we're not saying pleasure is wrong and agony is right. It has nothing to do with that. We're observing. We're learning, we're finding out about ourselves and each other. So that instead of ancient conditioned reflexes and habits, some intelligence can come into being. If the thought or the idea of a life without me is scary or saddening, can one question it immediately? What it is that is scary? Thought can produce hell or heaven. But we're asking whether hell or heaven is necessary. If thought is understood as it happens, intelligently. And there's not only in touchness with all the turmoil and problems and conflicts that rage in us, noisily or quietly and among each other, but there's in touch with what's around us, the natural things, trees, clouds, earth, grass, animals, buds on the branches, encased in ice or opening up. We will end here for today.